In the councils of government, we must guard against the NFL draft industrial complex.
What's going on, Packers fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Draft Industrial Complex. Aaron Nagler here, along with Tyler Brooke. Tyler, free agency is come and gone if you're a Packers fan, so let's dive right back into the draft, shall we? That's what it feels like anyway.
It was a fun day. I don't know. I know a lot of other people are
hours.
pretty. Yeah, a lot of other people are pretty mad, but like they did something. It's different than it was back in the day. So I'll take it.
I mean, you used to be able to set it. I think I've said many times when I was on the beat, I would literally request vacation the first week of free agency because I knew Ted wasn't going to dive in. So there is some activity. Obviously, the addition along the offensive line and cornerback, the lack of a wide receiver, I think has driven a lot of angst, along with a possible edge rush addition. And I think both of those are spots the Packers will look to in the draft. And obviously that's what we do here. We talk about the draft. And since we're in the throes of a dead period as far as the Packers free agent acquisitional activity goes, I thought we should look at your top 50 kind of big board, as it were. I know you dropped that over at the 33rd team a couple of days ago. And I thought that'd be a great kind of jumping off point as far as not just the Packers, obviously, but just the draft in general. Who are the guys that are on offer that first kind of day and a half, 2 days that, you know, fans should become familiar with as far as not just who the Packers might select, but who you're going to see go off the board on Thursday and Friday, because those are the two kind of meatiest days of the draft, as it were. So, you know, first off, I do want to obviously start with number one, but why Abdul Carter? Because I know that there are plenty of talented players each and every year in every draft class. And I have to think the exercise of coming up with who you think is the premium, number one, without question, best player out of an entirety of the college football class, that's got to be a daunting exercise.
I'll be totally honest with you. Abdul Carter wasn't even my number one prospect for 99% of this process. And I still 49% of me wants to put Travis Hunter there. And I think the reason I ultimately went with Abdul Carter is two things. One, if we're just going overall talent of what they can do full time and utilize their full talents, I would take Travis Hunter. But in reality, I don't think a team that drafts him is going to let him, at least right away, play both ways, just because it's unprecedented. But then the argument could be it was unprecedented at the college level, and maybe someone is crazy enough. If someone's crazy enough to let him do it, I would put him in my number one prospect. Because positional value of a guy that's going to basically take up 2 roster spots as a number one on both ends is, I mean, that's more than a number one prospect. I just don't know if it's going to happen. So I think that combined with the late surge from Abdul Carter during the season, I'm not even talking about this pre-draft process.
Right.
Taking over.
The last few games he played were fucking ridiculous, no doubt.
The fact that he messed up his shoulder and continued to play with basically one arm, and they lined him up on one side because he literally could not function on the other side. And then he continued to kick Notre Dame's ass. I love, it's one of my favorite traits that we don't talk about enough when we evaluate these guys: competitive toughness. It matters so damn much at every position, even quarterback. I want a quarterback. That's why I always loved Baker Mayfield, just a competitive as heck guy that's going to grind it out. He's going to lay his body out for his teammates. I think those guys are important, not just on-field value, but just locker room vibes. And again, we know, as much as I love my data and analytics, I am at heart a vibes guy.
Well, I mean, and the Baker thing is a perfect example of something that you talk about a guy's DNA, right? And how that is part of how they're wired. Look at that play from Baker all these years later. When you're talking about evaluating him as a college prospect and who he is as a player, that play this year where he's stiff arming, I can't remember who it is with the 49ers. Or no, Osa. And he's stiff arming him for a good 5 yards as he's still surveying down the field and gets the ball away. That's Baker. That's who he is. So that's a trait that you did absolutely see as he's coming out of college that is a part of just who he is as a player. I love that.
I'll never forget Baker against Kansas when they refused to shake his hand, and everyone was the mainstream media narrative was what a scumbag for his antics afterwards. And I'm like, I want that in my leader.
That's exactly what I want.
Agreed. Get a little nasty with it. So that's why I have Abdul number one. Plus, it was his first year as a full-time edge. He was an off-ball linebacker for the most part. he caught on so damn quick. And you look at all of his sacks, like there's not a lot of like ugly cleanup sacks on his tape.
Right.
It's like stuff that will immediately translate to the NFL. So plus he's a huge Darth Vader guy. Like that's got to count for something.
That does have to give you definite points.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Travis Hunter thing. I think is interesting because you talk about a team being maybe possibly crazy enough to let him play both ways, right? And look, the Patriots came right out and said it. They're open to the idea. Now, I don't think, you can really put too much stock in that, but man, I wouldn't be surprised if Vrabel and Elliott Wolf and those guys are like, yeah, man, we'll let you play both. I mean, and they have a very high pick.
Yeah.
When it comes to Travis Hunter, there's a possibility we see him kind of hit the ground running in the NFL that way. I mean, he's talented enough at both spots. It's just bizarre to watch because you're right. It's pretty unprecedented.
And the thing I love about him too is with all of the Colorado circus that's been happening the past couple of years,
right.
I love the person as much as I love the player. Like he is so committed to his craft at both positions. I mean, he spends extra time trying to learn. His interests outside of football are not distractions. He just straight up loves to fish. But it was the comments at the combine that really stood out to me because he kept getting asked, like, do you want to play both ways in the NFL? And it wasn't just yes. It was yes, but I want to earn it. And I think coaches are going to love that. Like, he's totally right. Put him at one position, make him earn the right to play the other. And if that's the mentality he has going into it, I love it. Like, I think that's how he should enter the NFL.
And then at 3 and 4, you have a couple of Michigan guys.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in this order. You got Will Johnson, the corner, and then Mason Graham. I would have suspected Graham would have gone earlier. Is this positional or is it just purely prospect?
I refuse to drop Will Johnson down my board. Like he got a lot of flack, I guess, or like dropped down boards from this year. But the dude was dealing with turf toe this year, which is an incredibly painful injury.
Insanely tough, yeah.
And I could go into all the things I love about Will Johnson from like a size, movement skills, all of this. But like when the consensus pro comp for him is the reigning defensive player of the year, I think we're overthinking him a bit.
Yeah, maybe. All right.
As far as Mason Graham, I mean, just you turn on the Rose Bowl game from last season against Alabama, and he just completely took over that game. He is just such a stout, strong defender that, I mean, if I was a defensive line coach, I would turn him on and just have my kids watch him as like pure teach tape of how to take on a blocker. He's got some juice as a pass rusher. I just think he's a total 3-down player that's going to kick the crap out of an offensive line. I had heard some knee stuff with him, but I haven't heard anything else since I heard about that before the combine. So it seems like that checked out. Totally good with it. Right. I mean, he's about as clean of a prospect as you can get up in the trenches.
And then you've got a running back in your top 5. I know this kid is talented, but wow, 5th overall for Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. That's a statement right there.
So I think it's consensus that he's at least top 10. And I always like to think I have a pretty good eye with running backs. You know, I was a fullback. I'm not saying I was anything special as fullback. Let's get that out of here right now. But like, I love the run game. I'm fascinated by it. It's why I love Adam Stenavich so much with the way he designs the Packers run game, because it's allowed me to learn so much about the different ways they can get running backs involved. But in the evaluation process, contact balance to me is the number one, far and away most important trait, not only for running backs, but like a trait tied to a position, I think, is like the correlation between a running back with good contact balance and success in the NFL is crazy high. And this dude's, my comp for him is just like the peak of Doug Martin, like muscle hamster. I'm low to the ground. No one's bringing me down. And it's honestly amazing just watching him run. The argument against him is just that, and it bothers me, is just like, you know, once they played good competition, like he was breaking off big runs, but then everything else was like 0, 1, 1, 0, -1. And I'm like, watch those plays where he should be getting tackled 5 yards in the backfield and keeps breaking tackles or making guys miss and making something out of nothing. I like those plays more than the explosives. And even the explosives are just unbelievable because he'll shed like 4 or 5 tackles.
And that's the thing. You are somewhat, especially when it comes to production, a bit beholden to not only your level of competition, but your teammates and what's working around you. Yeah. And Packers fans don't have to look much further than Josh Jacobs last year, who made a whole lot of stuff happen when he was hit behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage and turned it into positive gains. Then next up at 6, you've got the first wide receiver on your board, McMillan out of Arizona. It's interesting how the shine has somewhat come off of him just anecdotally. I can't like pinpoint like, oh, people have soured on him because of X, Y, or Z. But it is fascinating to see how other names have started to kind of catch fire. And he has somewhat, I'm going to say, gone under the radar, but it's just fascinating to me how, and I guess that's part of just the pre-draft process, but everyone has kind of solidified him as, yep, he's your number one wide out in this class, but now you barely hear about it.
Another one of those prospects, I just think you know exactly what he is. And to me, that's a phenomenal player. He's Drake London with the Odell Beckham catches. Like, he's a big body, like, and everyone's worried that he's not running the 40. And like, I always like to jokingly call out prospects when they're not going to do the athletic testing just because I want my data. But like, the tape, we get it. He's not like a burner, but after the catch, he can make some angle breaking moves and take off. And he knows he's not going to take every catch to the house, but there's enough juice there. And then he's going to be a phenomenal contested catch guy. He's got some route running to him. And again, it's just that after the catch stuff that made me like Drake London so much. And we can all bag on Drake London, but the situation he's in and some of the tape he still puts up, I think he's still a really solid number one. So I'm a big fan.
And then you talk about the pre-draft process. Next up at number 7, you've got a guy who, I swear to goodness, at the end of the college football season, into the start of the pre-draft process, like the All-Star games and the combine, whatever, this is a guy who was swirling around potentially being there when the Packers selected 23. I think that's completely out of the water now after the athletic testing in particular. You've got Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M.
I mean, the tape says everything I want from it. And we've talked about Shamar Stewart, I feel like, quite a bit on this show. But the fact that him and Scorton dropped 20 plus pounds for the combine tells me clearly the scheme was we're going to bulk these guys up and just have them mush rush and hold running lanes and everything like that. The athletic testing tells me everything I need to know. He dropped the weight. He was phenomenal and all of that. Like, historically, the only athletic comp we have for an edge of his size is literally Myles Garrett. And I'm not saying he's going to become Myles Garrett, but I think he's deservedly skyrocketing up draft boards because there are not edges at that size that have that athleticism. Plus, I was even more impressed with his combine. Like, I was not expecting a guy as charismatic as he was at the podium. I think he's a guy teams are going to fall in love with. To me, I think it's crazy if he makes it outside of the top 10. Just, he has stuff you can't teach, and the stuff you can could make him a very, very special pass rusher.
And then at 8, you've got my favorite wide receiver prospect in the draft, who I am now have given up hope that he will be available to the Packers in Matthew Golden out of Texas. Yeah. I love this kid's game.
I don't know how many people have him in the top 10, but again, with the amount of time I've spent learning wide receiver play, coaching the position for the last couple of years, I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we trying to like argue what the downsides are?
So much what he can't do or what he doesn't do instead of what he does do.
But
and what he
I don't know what he
really
doesn't do.
Good, man.
My argument is I don't know what he doesn't do. Like, the argument, the knock on him is, well, he doesn't play like a 4.29 40. And I'm like, I don't care. He still stretches the field vertically.
And he's really fucking good at everything he does. Yeah.
Body control, tracking, deep speed, route running, acceleration, deceleration against press. I even see some reps where he's at least trying his ass off on blocking.
and that can be coached. You can get that some of that continued to be improved. No doubt.
I think he's a complete weapon. I believe Matt Harmon, who does reception perception, is also extremely high on him. I just think he's a total package. He's going to be a winning football player. So
I talked to Matt about him at the combine, and we were both like, I was lamenting the fact that now there's no chance he makes it to Green Bay, unfortunately. Then you got Williams, the edge out of Georgia. They just had their pro day. I like this kid's game. I'm not too familiar with it beyond, 1 or 2 kind of sit down sessions where I've taken, most of the top 20, 25 guys and tried to take a look at them. But you have him in your top 10. What do you like about him?
Yeah, so this is mostly 2023 tape is why I was so high on him. It's 2024, I believe he was on record saying his ankle, he had a high ankle sprain to start the year and then just kept playing on it, which again, toughness, but maybe not the wisest decision as far as draft evaluation, but he's strong as shit and long. Like, yes, that's really all you need for that evaluation. Like, if you need a run stopping DN who, can bull rush and, you can work on some of that other stuff, like, I don't think you're getting a stronger prospect in this draft. Like, there are some reps that just, if he gets extended on you, like as an offensive lineman, you have no chance. And that's why I have a top 10 grade on him.
And then rounding out the top 10, you have what has got to be one of my favorite dudes to watch as far as just play the game of football. I have no idea about where he'll fall in the draft simply because of the position. You have Tyler Warren at tight end. I absolutely love this kid. I love his game. I just, you never know at tight end. Like some guys can come in and they've got all the tools and you think he's going to hit the ground running and then they do absolutely nothing or they do nothing for a couple years. I don't know about the fit in the NFL because I think it's so dependent on where he ends up.
Listen, as Packers fans, we need to root for as many running backs, tight ends, and quarterbacks to fly up draft boards. So
absolutely.
Don't say anything.
Your part.
Yeah. Tyler Warren is, I think Danny Kellett said it best. It's like watching a kid, like an adult, play against kids on Thanksgiving in the backyard.
Correct.
He's so uniquely athletic for his size. I love when they use him as wildcat quarterback, but even the tape as a blocker is pretty damn good. So I'm not really worried about the scheme fit because if someone wants to get him to buy into being just like a blocking Y and line guy that can run routes, I'm totally cool with that. I think it's the versatility and ability to play him everywhere that makes him so valuable. And, running backs and tight ends, I'm not usually fans of giving top 10 grades to, but they're both. I got a running back and a tight end.
He's got to be one of the best players in this class, though. That's
just from a pure football player.
100%. Like you watch his game, and it's like to the quote. I mean, he does look like a man among boys at the college level. Obviously, that will change a bit when he hits the NFL. Then you have another Georgia prospect at 11 stars. I do not know much about this guy because I haven't watched a ton of the back end in particular, just because the Packers are so set there.
Yeah, so Malachi Starks, I am a Georgia guy, like as far as like a random team I just constantly follow. So I've always loved watching Georgia. I got to see them live win a national title. That was awesome in Indianapolis. Probably one of my favorite sports memories. But Starks was a 5-star athlete that just slotted into safety as a true freshman and then just held that position in college. He moves really well. I think the testing was a bit misleading for him at the combine because once he did on-field drills, I mean, the fluidity and speed just suddenly showed up, which was super odd. But I think he has the instincts and fluidity and everything you want to be one of these deep safeties that can occasionally play in the box. I think there's versatility to him. And I just think he's a heck of a good football player. And I like good football players, so that's why I have him. So
I mean, speaking of heck of a good football player, next up you got Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because usually offensive line, you think, okay, there's at least one in the top 10, but here's your first real true offensive lineman kind of sitting here at 12. What do you like about his game?
Yeah, honestly, we got a bunch of guys from this 10 to 20 range I put in the O-line because I don't think anyone is a true blue chipper in this class, but it is weirdly kind of deep on all of these guards that could play tackle, but played tackle in college, but there's questions about length. It's just the common theme of all of these guys. Banks is the one I weirdly see best translating to tackle because he's so dang dense, but his lateral movement is still there for a guy of his size. He handled left tackle pretty damn well his entire time at Texas. He handles twists and stunts really well. His recovery is really impressive, but again, it's just that like bulk thickness. If you need to play him at guard, I think he would be a kick-ass guard because he can just move bodies, can displace people, and his anchor is pretty dang good. I just want to preface it again, like, because I have all of these O-line bunched here. It's really close for me for all of them because they all kind of bring a different type of skill set, but I enjoyed watching all of them.
Next up at 13, you have a guy in Josh Simmons out of Ohio State who I know has been connected to the Packers a few times in a couple different national mocks. And I have, and I think others have joked that he'll fit right in with the Packers, not only because he's coming off a knee injury, slide in your joke right there, but also because he's got position versatility. There's a guy who I can see playing 4 different spots. Yeah,
the ACL probably could get him slid into that Packers range, and I still think he'd be pretty dang good value there. He's got very quick feet. I think he's a heck of an athlete for a left tackle. And when he latches onto you, you're not going to be able to do much. So those 2 traits alone, I can see why he's a left tackle. I don't know if we're going to get all the way down to 50, but
we'll go to 25. Trust me. We'll let everyone go read the rest at 30-13.
Yeah. But Donovan Jackson, the guy that replaced him at left tackle, who was a guard, also did a phenomenal job. But I think, Simmons fully healthy. He's polished. He's got the foot speed. Obviously, he doesn't have the quote unquote arm length, but I still like his frame to be a tackle.
Then you've got Mike Green out of Marshall, an edge who I got to say, this has been at least on my end, as I'm kind of learning about the class, this has been a hot name.
Yeah.
That wasn't a guy I was really familiar with during the college football season, but boy, I can see why people like him.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you watch a small school guy, at least what I like to do, this is just a personal preference. First thing I do is I'm watching the tape against good teams. Like, I get it, you're probably going to get your butts kicked like they played Ohio State and Virginia Tech. Oof. But I want to watch that tape, and let me tell you, man, like that kid holds his own absolutely. And something I really like about him, he is a speed rusher, he's got good get off, but he is already one of those savvy rushers that knows how to set you up. So if you start oversetting to account for the speed, he can cut inside. If you're waiting for that inside move, he can set up inside and throw you a spin move or something like that. I love a guy that has a plan of attack and knows how to set up pass protectors. Another guy that we won't get to, but like Donovan Ezraku, the Boston College guy, reminds me a lot of that.
I really like him. You put me onto him a couple weeks ago. He is exciting. Now that's a player I can
give me him at 23 and I'll freak 100%.
Out. Totally
I'll freak out.
Totally agree. I love his game.
Yeah.
Back to the top 25 of the 50 here. We got at 15, you got Will Campbell out of LSU. Another guy I haven't watched a whole lot, but another name that I've read a lot about during this process.
Yeah, I mean, I get why people think that he's like a top 10 pick. I think there's a lot to like about him. I love him as a person. He is wired to be a left tackle in the NFL. I don't have a ton of like bad things to say about him. I just don't think his traits stand out to me as much as the other guys. So that's probably why I have him slightly below Simmons and Banks, but don't take that as a knock on him. I still think he can be most likely a pretty good guard. My question is, he's 6'6", and his stance is kind of funky.
He's real high.
Cat interfering. Yeah. I think he can play tackle just because he's fluid enough. It's an interesting evaluation because I actually would not want to kick him into guard.
Especially at 6'6". I mean, that feels egregious. And then at 16, you've got Revel out of East Carolina, another guy who's coming off a knee injury. There's a lot of guys in this corner class that are banged up coming into the kind of rookie season, so to speak.
Yeah. Again, I try my best to ignore injuries except for Benjamin Morrison's. Like if it's an ACL and it's been a minute and I think he'll be fine by his rookie year, I'm not too worried about it. But like Morrison's hip, requiring hip surgery as a corner freaks me out. But Savone Revel, I'm extremely high on. I mean, this is a 6'2" corner with length, sticky in man coverage, and aggressive as heck in run support. Like he is not afraid to tackle. I think the movement skills, length, everything. If the Packers took him at 23, it's another guy I'd be absolutely thrilled with because I just think he's wired the right way to play the position.
Then another offensive lineman at 17, Ursery out of Minnesota, another guy I am not familiar with whatsoever.
He's like a 6'6", 330 tackle. I am a massive fan of his. I know the consensus probably has him in the 40s. The context is important here. He did not start playing organized football until his junior year of high school. He is a mammoth of a human. I'm surprised at how athletic and fluid he is. He knows how to engage and sink his hips and use those to, generate push in the run game. I think it's rare to find guys this size that can have those movement skills as a tackle. It's going to take work. He's not going to be like a rookie, an all pro as a rookie. Right. But right. I think with development and polish, like I'm thinking like,
is he strictly a tackle or do you think he kicks inside at all?
I'd want to keep him at tackle because he's so dang big. Like you could put him at guard. I'd prefer him at tackle. Yeah, and I don't think I'd want to start him right away, but like the comp I could see, and I'm not joking here, like Jordan Mailata, like a big body that needs some polish, that got some coaching the right way, and then suddenly became, a superstar at the position. Like I am that high on him.
Well, I applaud you because, like you said, the consensus probably has him way lower, and I love it when people actually kind of stake a claim to a guy where they see a little differently than the consensus. That's what you want this time of year because so much of it is groupthink.
Well, my favorite thing about the draft process is when we disagree, as long as you're not being like a dick about it, right? Like Peter Bukowski and I are talking on DMs right now, just about.
Wait, you're having a difference of opinion with Peter Bukowski? That never happens.
No, but like we're having a great conversation about it. Like it's not, my issues are stuff I don't want to bash the kid for publicly. So we're just talking. But like I love the discourse. I think it's healthy. I think it makes you think about football differently. So I always appreciate the difference in opinion.
Then at 18, you got Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. Now, this is a guy who I've watched, and I absolutely love this upside here because, look, man, as Ted Thompson used to say, athletic big men, the good Lord only made so many, and Williams is one of them. No question.
Teach tape on how to get extended and shed a block. He's ridiculously strong upper body. I got to see him in person in Columbus this year, and you watch him in warmups, like just a wide human. I don't know how else to describe it, but like his upper body and everything, like just doesn't make sense to me. I came away. I mean, I couldn't stop watching him during that game, and it's a game with Jeremiah Smith and all these other players on the field, and I kept going like, I really want to watch more of this Ty Lee guy. So I'm super high on him.
I love that. Then you have another offensive lineman at 19, and Armand Membo out of Missouri. Yeah. This is a guy who can move. I don't know much outside of how athletic he is. That's what has jumped off the few times I've looked at him.
Yeah, he's going to probably go top 10. He just tore up the combine. Like, a guy that big should not move that well. And granted, maybe I'm too low on him. But again, I just have all of these offensive linemen, like we talked about, 10 through 20, that are all so tightly grouped.
Right.
Maybe it's I got to him late in the process and didn't watch enough of him. But, like, I think he is extremely good in the run game, especially on reach blocks for a guy that size and length. Like, he can really, get to a landmark. It's a tough angle and still seal off guys. So I'm pretty impressed with that stuff. Think he needs a little more refinement, especially in pass protection. But a guy with that size athleticism profile with the right coaching will be just fine.
And then we got Jalen Walker out of Georgia. This is a guy who, again, this is a name that you hear a lot. There's a lot of heat around not just his game, but like his potential. You have him in at number 20. Do you see him at edge, or is he linebacker material in your mind? Where do you have him?
I think this is unpopular, but I think I'd rather have him at linebacker. I get the value of edge, but I'm just not sure how it translates. When I see him, I think of like Edgerrin Cooper. It just comes to mind. Like, I want in the middle of my defense a psychotically athletic and explosive linebacker, especially in today's league where you just need to cover a lot of ground. I think he fits that role perfectly. And I think he's just a little too small and doesn't have like that length and strength and just everything you need to be a full-time 3-down edge. But if you want to mix and match it also, I'm totally cool with that. And I can totally appreciate where you'd want to go there.
And then at number 21, you have your first quarterback, where I agree that this is the first quarterback on the board, or should be. I'm not trucking with the idea that any of these quarterbacks are top 25, but that's just me. But you have Cam Ward at 21.
I love his story, man. Like, a guy that went from a 0-star recruit, incarnate word, to Washington State to here. And like the fact that he's played in multiple schemes, I think is a huge plus. I love his off-script ability. I think his pocket presence is ridiculously impressive. And that arm talent, like in his ability to make those plays and extend them. I just have so many questions about how he works as a traditional passer and handles just, doing the boring stuff. I think we see too many quarterbacks not want to do the boring stuff. And I'm not saying he can't do any of that. And he is the only quarterback in this class where I can envision him. He has that potential to be the franchise guy for a long time. And I do think he's wired the right way. Like, he's been doubted his entire life, and you kind of want that chip on your shoulder in a quarterback. I mean, we're Packers fans and we had Aaron Rodgers for however long. I think you can appreciate that. Love the kid. I'm very impressed with his story, and the highs on his tape are so fun.
They're impressive. There's no doubt about it. Then at 22, you have Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, the defensive lineman. I absolutely love his potential if he lands with Green Bay. I don't think he will. I think he'll be gone by the time they're on the clock. But God, I love this kid's game.
330-pound defensive tackle shouldn't move like he does.
No, at all.
And then you combine that with his bull rush, which I think is just absolutely terrifying, because he knows how to use his size, can collapse pockets, stop the run. You want to talk about a TJ Slayton upgrade? Like, this is a supercharged nose. That would be an awful lot of fun. And I think we've talked about it before, but the rumblings are that the Packers have been pretty interested in him. So would be, again, another guy at 23. Sign me up. We've talked about Ezra.
Run up the card. Yeah. Run it up. I'm all in. And then at 23, you have Nick Emenwari out of South Carolina. Again, another position group I haven't really looked at. What do you like about his game?
I mean, the freakish athleticism shows up. I mean, I think he's number one all time on safeties and relative athletic score after the combine. He like 6'4", 220 safety that flies all over the field, isn't afraid to use his size. He's out of control a little bit, not always the most disciplined or technically sound, but we can work on that, right? Like, a guy that athletic,
it's coaching. Absolutely.
Yep, exactly.
Coach him up. At 24, you have Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, another defensive lineman, another guy whose game I really love. I do have read some rumblings about off-field stuff and concerns there. But, I mean, on pure talent and tape, I love this kid's game.
Yeah, I mean, I watched him at Texas A&M before he transferred, and I was like, this is like a tweener. I'm not sure what his role is. His hand usage needs a lot of work. He proved everything to me at Ole Miss that I was concerned about. Strong as hell at the point of attack when he keeps his pads low. He does know how to disengage now with hand usage. I'm not going to say he's a bad athlete in pursuit or anything like that, but he's adequate. And that's probably what's keeping him from being higher than the other D linemen on this board for me. But again, he's a top 25 player for me. I still think there's absolutely a role for him in the NFL.
And then at 25, you have Colston Loveland out of Michigan, the tight end. We have 2 tight ends in the top 25 and only 1 quarterback, which tells you a lot about the class and how athletic and how much upside Loveland must have.
Yeah, definitely more of a wing than Warren, right? Where Warren can play a lot of spots. I see him more as an F, like a move tight end that can play in the slot, things like that. But that's not to discount everything. Like, he is long as hell. He's a smooth mover. He's got a great catch radius. He is a willing blocker. I can see him at least being effective on like those split zone smack blocks where you're coming across the formation just to kick a guy out. So there's some versatility in that regard. I just think he's a definite pass catching weapon. And in a class where this receiver group falls off a cliff pretty quickly, right. I am a pretty big fan of what he can bring in the slot.
Love to see it. Those are the top 25 prospects on Tyler's top 50 big board, which is available at the 33rd team. There will be a link in the description of this video for you to check out. Make sure you check out the entire 50 because it's really informative. And Tyler, I really appreciate you doing all the work because that way I can just talk to you and I don't have to watch half as much tape. It's good stuff.
Hey, we're at 155 prospects right now, and
amazing.
Now I'm just speed running day 3, guys. Like, you're not going to get me at this part of the process sitting down for 2 days on a guy. Like, we got work to do. Got
to get through them. Tyler, I really appreciate the time and all the work you put in, and I'll talk to you next week, man.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, man.